Good morning and welcome to all our viewers across India and indeed across the world. We do broadcast around the world, and today is an exciting day for so many looking at the Indian economy. It is important for a billion plus Indians. It's the union budget, the third one presented, full budget presented by Nirmala Sitharaman, the finance minister. That's going to be at 11 a.m. in the morning, and throughout the morning, throughout the afternoon, and in our programming in the evening, we'll be telling you what A, the expectations are, B, the budget itself, and of course several reactions. But just in terms of a couple of broad themes that we'll be looking at in the hours ahead, income tax, and will there be relief on income tax? Is that something which can actually spur personal consumption? That's something we'll be looking at closely. Capital expenditure, so very important, and the entire debate on capital expenditure is on whether private expenditure can actually step up, because it's the government which is driving capital expenditure, which is good in pushing up our macro level numbers, but perhaps more needs to be done in terms of private capital expenditure. Renewable energy, solar power projects, we do need to think about the renewable sector. It is a critical part of our economy. Will there be critical parts of that which the finance minister will look at? Private consumption has lagged at 4%. That's what I mentioned. We need to improve that. And perhaps significantly as all of this, the entire issue of jobs. The economic survey yesterday said that India needs to create nearly 80 lakh jobs a year in order to sustain and improve our rate of growth. Mukesh Bhutani with us right now, a familiar face on NDTV and somebody who has a lot of expectations himself. Thanks very much. So let's start off on a populist note, shall we? No prizes for guessing the question. Income tax. It probably makes sound sense to push up private consumption by bringing down income tax rates. Is that something we can expect or hope for?
I think that is widely expected, primarily because it's been some time since the threshold for levy of tax was revised, number one. Number two, if you just simply look at the spike in inflation in 2023, though it was down in 2024 fiscal year, there has been a wide expectation that it will come down. Also rejigging of the schemes. So if you recall, 3 budgets back, an option was given to the taxpayer to choose between a tax savings versus a differential rate of tax without tax savings. I think there was a bit of a element of less of marketing that the government did to encourage taxpayers to move to the new scheme. So we could expect some changes there as well. It could be a complete transition, or it could be continuity of both the schemes, but with greater clarity.
Yeah. Let's talk a little about capital expenditure. That really does pump the macro level numbers. India's overall GDP growth numbers extremely robust, the largest, most significant among growing economies. But that's been driven by the government. And there's nothing necessarily wrong in that at all. But in terms of private sector involvement in driving India's capital expenditure, what do you believe needs to be looked at in terms of policy initiatives to push that up?
Well, I think there are adequate cues in the economic survey. I like the concept coined by the chief economic advisor called a tripartite arrangement. He wants to make the state government and the private enterprises as very much a party to many of the recommendations that he's making in the economic policy, and one of the most important ones is the capital expenditure. So if you look at the capital expenditure, there are 2 phases for the last 4 years. I'm looking at the COVID year, the post-COVID recovery year. Obviously, in times of black swan events like the COVID, the federal government steps in, like it happened in many parts of the world, looks at leading the capital
expenditure. I'm interrupting you for half a second because we've got images of the finance minister now having arrived from her residence to her office at North Block. So she's got a busy couple of about 2 hours before the budget actually is presented by her. From here, there'll be a photograph which is taken with those who were involved in the preparation of the budget. She then goes to Rashtrapati Bhavan and then makes her way to Parliament. And then, of course, we'll see her not with the Mr. Bhutani with the budget suitcase, because that's passé. We're a digital India now. So a tablet which she holds up, and then she goes, and 11 a.m. that's what happens. So I mean, it's a third budget, but I presume, there would be an element of nervousness there as well. But do carry on with your thoughts. We were talking about capital
I think
expenditure.
she's fairly seasoned. She's breaking
Yes.
the record of Morarji Desai
Yes.
having rendered the budget for 6 consecutive years. So on the capex, the story is that post COVID, federal government stepped in, like in many parts of the world, and they have been incurring a fair bit despite the revival of the economy, particularly in the last 2 years. The economic survey says that states have a role to play, and so does the private enterprises. So 2 pointers which are coming out very clearly in the survey: responsibility for capex, and more importantly, responsibility for employment generation, which is again coming out as a red flag in the economic survey. By doing that, I think the chief economic advisor, speaking for the finance minister, is throwing the responsibility equally on the private enterprises as well. And no better panel than CII
Yeah.
to communicate that views.
No, absolutely. Let's talk about jobs, because I think ultimately that's what we need to see. The economic survey said India must create 80 lakh jobs each year for the next 20 years. How does that happen?
Jobs are never created in isolation. Neither can jobs be created by government or even state government upping their expenditure. Again, 2 aspects that have featured very prominently in the economic survey, and I would expect that it would be translated into budget proposals as well. One, recognition of services as an avenue for job creation. In fact, the economic survey talks about the Global Capability Center, what started off as a Texas Instrument 1985 center in Bangalore, resulting in 150 multinationals creating global capability centers. But it equally talks about making entry norms easier, addressing the ease of doing business in India, thereby suggesting that we can do more from a reform standpoint to create more.
All right, well,
capability
we're going to have to
centers.
interrupt you there, Vishnu, because we're getting live pictures at the moment from North Block. That is Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, along with the Minister of State for Finance, Pankaj Chaudhary, of course, geared up to make history. She is going to be presenting the budget for the 7th straight time. Nirmala Sitharaman has ditched the traditional Bahi Khata. She did so in 2021. Continues the trend of presenting the budget in a paperless format. And what you can see there is, of course, a fascinating evolution from the traditional briefcase to the Made in India tablet that is in the finance minister's hand. She, of course, is in fact showing that tablet. Vishnu, if you can hear me at the moment, those are live pictures we are getting from North Block.
All right, so images there of the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, just a brief visit to North Block, and then that photograph with all of the officers in the Finance Ministry and so many ministries across the country who've helped prepare the budget. And so let's see if she says anything now. Unlikely. She's on her way, as I understand it, to Rashtrapati Bhavan, a brief meeting with the President as well. But this was a small photo opportunity before the takes place. There'll be more today as she meets the President in a little while from now. That's about a half an hour meeting. And then she ends up in Parliament. Again, she'll be showing off that tablet where she's got the budget. She'll be reading off that as well. That starts at 11 a.m. this morning. So it's all happening now. The stage has clearly been set for the Union Budget of India to be presented. Let me just go back to Mr. Bhutani once again. Sorry, sir, we interrupted you with those images. We'll keep doing that, but go ahead with what you were saying.
So I think your question on the job creation, one is identifying the potential that global capability centers offer with 150 multinationals. There is clearly an opportunity for India to promote more employment creation within those 150 global capability centers. Second is the disruption that COVID and trade war between United States and China has caused more and more European and US multinationals to look at India, and that is where the global value chain as a concept has evolved. It featured prominently in the election manifesto. I'm hoping that there would be budget announcements. There are adequate cues in the economic survey yesterday talking about how global capability centers and manufacturing and global value chains. So I think a combination of both the manufacturing and the services sector, besides allied agriculture sector, are really, in my view, avenues for growth. But again, going back to the point that I made earlier, the states, by way of policies, by way of creating a more conducive environment, and the private sector doing its bit by, getting a bit more aggressive, if I may say so, on capex, can create employment. So I don't think that it is solely the responsibility of the federal government over here. I think they will lay down the roadmap. They will have to create a facilitative environment, and the other stakeholders have to play an equally important role. And last but not the least, the importance of MSME as well.
Yes.
I think we've been talking a lot about it. That sector has been reeling still under the post-COVID recovery pressure. Besides the formalization of the economy that has happened, I think this is, in my view, just the right moment to create the MSME as impetus for growth by making sure that there is ease of compliance, ease of customs procedures, ease of their ability to be able to sell more and more Indian competitive manufactured products in countries with which we have free trade agreements. So I think it's really a bundle of opportunities that lie ahead of us.
And in as much as there are those who say that while it's just not enough to look at the macro numbers, let's focus on that side for a moment, because the macro numbers, the overall GDP rate is very positive. Yes, private investment is lacking, but core inflation is benign. There does appear to be enough space for fiscal consolidation.
I would say that the fiscal consolidation is now largely revenue driven. The kind of tax collections that we have experienced in the last 3 financial years, particularly 2 financial years, is unprecedented. The reasons for that are well known: increased compliance, the benefits, medium-term benefits of the GST spelling out. More importantly, for the first time, we are seeing both direct and indirect tax firing growth. Now, to some extent, you can argue that this is sustainable, particularly in the short to medium term. But I think, the whole notion about payment of taxes is all about, not just about compliance, but it's all about widening and deepening the tax base. I think the finance minister in the last 3 budgets has explored all forms of avenues for deepening and widening the tax base. So there is very limited policy scope for her to be able to deepen it further, widen it further. I also think that it's a given that she will not raise the tax rates, which means that the only opportunity for her to continue with the tax collection is to, number one, encourage more businesses to grow, because that's how they will contribute, and put more money in the pockets of the taxpayer, which means consumption will increase and consumption taxes like GST will increase. So I think fiscal correction is largely tax collection driven and not with regard to curtailing expenditure.
Okay. All right. So that's just a look at some of the key issues, and there are so many which we are going to be discussing. But just a reminder of what today is all about: the Union Budget presented by Nirmala Sitharaman, the third full budget under Modi 3.0. The Finance Minister presenting that tablet, which is where the budget is. She's going to be reading off that. She is now on her way to Rashtrapati Bhavan, would have reached over there. She has a meeting with the President, and then she heads to Parliament as well. So we'll be going through point by point all the important points on the budget, what we can expect.